Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Books and Books right here in the cultural heart of Coral Gables. We're very happy to have you with us. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Steve. On behalf of everyone here at Books and Books, we appreciate you being here. While you're silencing your cell phones, please take a look at our Books and Books newsletter. We have these on the counter where tonight's books are being sold. This will give you a synopsis of all the wonderful events we have at Books and Books every night of the week. We have Spanish events, we have kids events, we have poetry reading, first-time authors, and celebrity signings. A couple of note worth mentioning. Tomorrow night we have Carl Hyacin joining us at the Temple Judea, free and open to the public, with his young adult book, Skink No Surrender. And on October 2nd, we will be hosting a former First Lady, former Senator, former Secretary of State, first woman to walk on the moon, Hillary Clinton. Her new book, Hard Choices, will be available. We are selling tickets for that. They are going fast, so please make sure you get those as well. There's something for everyone's interest, as you can see, and many of them are now being live streamed through the internet, as you can see by the lights and cameras here in the store. So I will remind you, for the benefit of those that may be watching on the internet, watching the audience through these cameras pointed at the audience, please make sure you're sitting next to who you're supposed to be sitting next to. I also remind you that flash photography is forbidden because that interferes with the internet streaming. So I encourage you to take a copy of the newsletter, or you can always go to our website at booksandbooks.com. Give us your email address. That way we can alert you to everything that's going on. You don't miss a thing. And if you do decide to watch online, you can always call the store at the number on your screen. You can order a book from us. We'll get it signed for you, and we'll even ship it to you anywhere free of charge in the U.S. You can also call and ask a question of the author while the event is even in progress. But tonight we are very pleased to welcome Josh Young and Fred Levin in conversation about And Give Up Showbiz. In the early 90s, Big Tobacco was making a killing. There was no more entity more powerful, and national tobacco-related deaths numbered in the hundreds of thousands each year. The economic loss from smoking-related illnesses was billions of dollars. And yet Big Tobacco had never paid a nickel in court until one trial lawyer discovered that he could revise part of the Medicaid law so that it would enable Florida to sue Big Tobacco to reimburse the state for health care costs. The end result? Hundreds of thousands of American lives have been and will continue to be saved because one lawyer found a loophole and ran with it. We welcome, please give them a nice warm welcome, our speakers for this evening, Josh Young, the author of the book, and his subject, Fred Levin.
Thank you, and thank you to Books and Books for organizing this and everyone for coming. Fred's a fascinating subject. I know you're all going to purchase the book. So I'm going to open with a story that's not even in the book. Why is it not in the book? Well, Fred didn't happen to remember it during the year we worked together putting the book together. It's a quintessential story, and it was one that when we were in New York last week, I told several times when we were doing press. There was a large humanitarian dinner in New York. They were raising money for all the humanitarian causes around the world. And Fred had been invited. His son was also there, and Fred was seated next to a sort of courtly elderly gentleman, and this is back in the days when Fred liked to tip the cocktails back. And so Fred's having a few before the speeches get underway, and he's swaying side to side a little bit, and his son Martin sees this, and he thinks, well, I better go over and check up on Dad. So he comes over to the table, and how you doing, Dad? I'm great. I want you to meet my new friend, David. This is David here, right here. And Martin looks, nice to meet you, looks down at the place card. Nice to meet you, Mr. Rockefeller. It's David Rockefeller, the scion of the Rockefeller family. So Fred's now, oh shit, what am I going to do now?
And there are only about 30 people there.
30 people in the whole room. So now the speeches begin. Mikhail Gorbachev stands up, former premier of the Soviet Union, who's at the dinner, and he says, this is an outstanding event, and I'm so happy to be here tonight with one of my heroes, President Bill Clinton. President Clinton's at the dinner. President Clinton stands up and he says, I am honored to be at this event. This is really a landmark gathering, a small room, but a landmark gathering of like-minded individuals who are helping the world. And one of my heroes is here tonight. For all he has done with his music and his celebrity and his culture, Bono, the lead singer of U2. Bono stands up and Bono says, this is an outstanding event and I'm so happy to be here. I'm from Northern Ireland, and for me, peace is personal. And Betty Williams, who won the Nobel Peace Prize for the work she did in Northern Ireland, is here tonight. And Betty Williams stands up, and she said, I am so happy to be here tonight with my hero, Fred Levin.
And this is a true story.
like all the stories in the book. And Fred stands up, gives a wobbly wave. Everyone, Gorbachev, President Clinton, Bono, and certainly David Rockefeller, look at him, and they all are thinking, and I didn't interview them, they're all thinking the same thing: who the heck is Fred Levin? And so it really begs the question when you're in a crowd like that and you're honored. Fred Levin is one of the foremost trial attorneys in the United States. The cases that he has won have resulted in sweeping safety changes that have benefited every individual in the United States, whether they know his name or not. The University of Florida Law School is the Frederick G. Levin College of Law. Fred has had many outside endeavors in his life. He managed the boxer Roy Jones Jr., said to be the best pound-for-pound boxer of the 20th century. For that, he was named Boxing Manager of the Year by 2 different organizations. He's in the Boxing Hall of Fame. He's in the National Trial Lawyers Hall of Fame, the only individual to be in both of those halls of fame. Please. He was named the chief of the country of Ghana. But also, controversy has followed Fred Levin around like a lapdog, and he has lived an incredibly colorful life that has resulted in the Florida bar trying to disbar him on 3 separate occasions. There were 2 prominent murder investigations of which he was tagged of having something to do with. And I assure you, if you go to Pensacola and you go to a bar and you have a beer and you talk to the guy next to you, like I did, he will say, "Have Fred tell you how he got away with those 2 murders." and people believe this. So that's kind of who Fred Levin is, but not really. I think his life has been lived like a John Grisham novel. And it makes for great drama, and it made for a great book. So some of that drama is also very nice, and he's been very philanthropic. So, for example, and we can start with this topic, Fred, the University of Florida Law School, the Frederick G. Levin College of Law. It's nice. There's a big stone wall. The name is there on the law school. It's quaint. Other benefactors have had institutions named after them. The Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, named for President Kennedy. The Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern, named for the cereal magnate John Kellogg. The Annenberg School of Communications at USC. I mean, these are pillars of philanthropy in our community. And so, of course, we have the Frederick G. Levin College of Law. Only when that law school was named, it resulted in such great controversy that the dean of the law school ended up losing his job. The president of the university ultimately was forced out because of this. And there was a bill proposed to the legislature when Jeb Bush was governor to give Fred his $10 million back to take his name off the law school. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that experience, Fred?
All right. The whole thing started, I guess, with tobacco. And I never, ever believed that for a moment that tobacco was going to pay anything. And when it finally did, and there was a lot more money than I dreamed of, and I was going to give it away. Well, about the time all of this was taking place, the Bar Association had, for whatever reason, they had brought charges against me. One was for betting on a football game. I mean, it was, the other was, I had called the defense lawyer in the trial that he was being ridiculous, and the Bar Association was upset about that and brought charges. And then the third was I made a comment about a judge who refused to give a friend of mine a bond. But anyhow, so I had pissed off the Florida bar, and for a lot of reasons. One was tobacco, the other was I'd been very, very fortunate and had some great results. So the dean of the law school came in to see me along with the head of the foundation, and at the time I had just, like I said, this would have been like on a Wednesday, Tuesday, I had gotten a lot of money from tobacco for fees, and I was going to give it away anyhow. So they Dean said, "We're here for you to talk to a friend of yours, a guy from West Pond named Bob Montgomery, and for $6 million, we would build this new law school building and name it for him." And then the other guy said, for $10 million, we'd name the whole College of Law. And bang, I got to thinking, I said, now, this would be payback to these guys, because as a lot of you know, the University of Florida Law School was the University of Florida. It was the law school. And, you know, the presidents, governors, and just everybody had been graduates of that school. So in about 15 minutes, I said, I'll do this if it meets a bunch of different things. And so the dean called the president of the university. The president said, yes, go ahead. And it was that quick. I agreed to do it, and all of a sudden, my name was on the law school. And as Josh said, they started getting letters. I mean, and you've seen some of the letters. I mean, it was...
They're in the book. Vitriolic letters, silk stocking, corporate lawyers saying, this is appalling that you would put this man's name on our law school. This is a law school where I attended law school. My partners went. My son is there now. My grandchildren are going to go there. Well, that was the whole point, because when this these silk stocking lawyers' grandchildren graduate and they walk up on the stage, Fred's name's on the diploma. I mean, there's just no getting around that. So there was a lot of animosity toward that, and
some of the letters really, really were bad. What they didn't know, the dean, his last name was Matazar, the dean of the law school, and some of the people didn't realize that Dean Matazar was Jewish. So some of the comments that were made, and he never said a word other than to me, let me know who some of my dear, dear friends were, some of the former presidents of the Florida Bar and things of that nature. But there were some great comments from certain former presidents.
Yeah, there was a real division, and it really underscores this sort of hero-villain, and it's rooted. I mean, there's several lawyers here tonight, and I don't have to explain this to them. Is the lawyer a hero or a villain? Trial lawyers make a lot of money, particularly people like Fred, who were there at the onset of personal injury and went through it for 40 years. I mean, Fred has won or settled 100 cases for over $1 million. He's had verdicts of $50 million, $75 million. These are large amounts of money, and politicians have railed against this. The insurance industry, the medical profession, saying we got to stop these verdicts, we got to stop this. But when the little guy is wronged, he doesn't have anywhere else to go. He can't go to the government. The regulatory agencies are overwhelmed. He needs a lawyer. And boy, when you're hiring a lawyer, you want to hire a good one. And so there has been such good that they've done, but yet at the same time they make a lot of money. Now, to the next subject, in Fred's case, and only speaking in Fred's case now, not the other lawyers in the room, Fred liked to flaunt his success. So that meant having the biggest house. That meant having the most grand office, spending $1 million in the 1970s to put crystal chandeliers and pink wallpaper and hunting prints in your office, because that was the nature of what he did. And in his case, it also meant pivoting into different businesses. He started the first reality cable television channel in the United States, Blab TV, in Pensacola, Florida, when the expanded and they were forced to give the cable channels some of the lower numbers on the dial. He had a barbecue joint. He had a women's dress company. But most famously, I think, without a doubt, occurred in 1988 when a man walked into his office named Roy Jones Sr., and he asked Fred if he would like to represent his son, Roy Jones Jr., who had just been robbed of the gold medal at the Olympics. Roy Jones Jr. had won the fight, won the gold medal, and was awarded the silver, and it was later revealed that in fact the judges had been paid off to award the gold medal to the other opponent. So Roy Jones Jr. is coming on the boxing scene, and everyone wants to be in business with him. Don King, who all of you are familiar with because of the hair, Bob Arum, a great promoter. Sugar Ray Leonard at that time also was in the promotion business, and he had come to see Roy Jones Jr., but yet Roy Jones Sr. wanted Fred Levin. And he walked into his office and he said, I want you to represent my son. And Fred said, I don't know anything about boxing.
Right.
And Roy Jones Sr. said,
That's what
you have the job. so your brother was also involved in this. Tell us a little bit about the evolution of this really unusual relationship, an unusual endeavor for you.
Well, it was pretty simple doing, because at the time, he was a superstar, because having been robbed and the whole world saw it. And as a result, everybody wanted a part of him. We immediately had NBC as a contract, and anyhow, eventually, over a period of years, we went through, I think, 50 fights before when he became the heavyweight champion of the world. And all during that time, it was, I've never had that much fun in my life, I can tell you. It just, everywhere we would go, and the people you would meet, just was incredible. And I guess it was so exciting, and I loved it. And I mean, you can imagine running around the ring. I never lost. I never lost. It was this was just it was fabulous. And then, unfortunately, a lot of other boxers, feeling that we had done so much with Roy, would call and wanted us to represent. And that leads to another story. I got a call from a guy who was managing a fighter named Ike Quartet. Ike was from Ghana. And they said, would you be interested in representing him? And I knew he was a champion. And I said yes. They came to Pensacola, and we talked, and he was making about $50,000 a fight. Well, because of, again, luck, I was able to get him a fight with Oscar De La Hoya, where his purse was $5 million. The next thing I know, over a period of months, I get a call, and they said, you have been nominated to become a chief in the country of Ghana. And I, believing that this was like a colonel in the Alabama Highway Patrol, you get a little card. And and that's what I really, truly thought. And anyhow, the day comes, and they said, you come to the United Nations, which I did, and take me into this room and put all of this
robe ceremonial robe.
And
the whole family's there,
yeah,
friends.
I mean, this thing is wild. I mean, the drums beating and all of this stuff. And it's called being installed for what instead of installed, and you're there, and they explain that nobody could ever turn their back on you. They must always face you, and that anyhow. I'm one of 3 Americans. The other 2 that have been a chief in the country of Ghana. One was Shirley Temple Black, who was the ambassador. The other was Congresswoman Barbara Jordan, and again, me. And it's just, this is the kind of thing, I'd be walking down the street, you would think just different things would have happened to me that for no reason at all.
Well, the boxing was really, it wasn't about the money. I mean, Don King,
Yeah.
is known for bilking boxers and taking money from them and earning these huge fees. As we say in the book, Fred was basically making $100,000 a fight for the amount of work he was doing. I mean, that's really nothing for what it takes to set up a boxing match. But it was all about Fred Levin and publicity. And so, as he was saying, the fight would end, and Roy won 45 fights in a row. The referee is, they're raising his hand. Roy's got the belt, and there's Fred right in the middle, right looking where? Not at Roy, not at the referee, right at the camera, right at the HBO camera. And a close friend of Fred's for quite a number of years was Jack Kemp, the former Republican vice presidential candidate, congressman, and and cabinet member of the Bush administration, and he came up with the greatest line ever. He said, the most dangerous place in a Roy Jones Jr. fight is after the fight if you try to get between Fred Levin and the camera. And so for Fred, you know, it was millions of dollars of publicity, and it was more Fred. There's just one more area that I want to move into quickly before questions. It was all Fred.
Mm-hmm. Did you have a sign?
No, but I made sure that Roy would always say, and this is my...
Like to thank my manager.
My manager and greatest
And
lawyer in America.
He always had the most outrageous sport coat on, too. Mm-hmm. But all of this was me, Fred, and for all the good he did for a lot of people, he didn't do so much good for his family. I mean, Fred Levin, not to put too fine a point on it, was a horrible family man. Out of 13 graduations for his children, high school, college, law school, he went to one. His oldest daughter, Marcy, who is now a judge, graduated from law school. Fred, we got to go. Well, Gary Hart called him when he was running for president and said, do you want to come to the Kentucky Derby and drink bourbon? What do you think Fred did? Went to the Kentucky Derby, drank bourbon. And his wife at the time, on a more serious note, had what we now know today is called irritable bowel syndrome. She was very, very sick, but it was not diagnosed then. I mean, you can find stuff on the internet about it. Any doctor can help you if you have this condition. But they didn't know that at the time, and they told Fred that, no, she's just crazy. And so she was self-medicating, she was drinking a lot, she was taking a lot of drugs. And so Fred would come home, and you're crazy, and what are you doing, and this is ridiculous, and then he would go out with the boys for drinks. And it was a chapter in his life, it was his life, but it was something that when I looked at his story, and when he told his story to me, there's a human being here, and there's a human being with deep flaws and some regrets over this. And that, I think, to me, was what made it a complex story, but also what made Fred a complex hero and with something to say to everyone. And if you could just speak a little bit about that. I mean, I know it's tough now because she died 3 years ago.
No,
if you could reflect on that.
Well, there's two ways. One is to look back now and say all the things I missed. And of course, when you're my age and you look back and you say, gosh, I wish I could go back and change things. But then again, I've got to go back and say, I'm there during that time. And, well, you know, you want to come to the Kentucky Derby and sit it on the 50-yard, you know, at the finish line, or go to your daughter's graduation when all she's going to do is just walk through and get, well, and it would be, anyhow, a difficult decision. What I would have done if I had to live it all over again, it was a pretty heady thing. I mean, it was always me. And I look back, though, and I realize the harm I did. You'd be at a cocktail party, and, you know, everybody would be around me, and I'd look over there at her, and she'd just be sitting there. And she's wanting to talk to the wives about diapers or food or whatever it is. Nobody's really interested in that. They were interested in hearing about my great things that I've, in fact, I mentioned that we were throwing a, was it Fritz Hollings? Was that the?
Senator Hollings from South Carolina, yes.
Fundraiser for him, and somebody asked him from the audience and said, Senator, how is it that you and your wife have had such a wonderful relationship for 35 years? And he said, well, it's very easy. We've both been in love with the same man all of that time. And so that's probably somewhat what the problem was. And anyhow, I have to certainly give her credit that we had 4 children. And while I was, and believe me, I would leave early in the morning, come 5:30, I'd be meeting the guys for drinks, and I would come home out of it. And this would go on for 7 days a week. And, I find out now she was always, where's Daddy? Where's Daddy? Don't worry, he's doing this for you. And so the kids, I guess, they all have turned out extremely well. We got my son is general counsel to the Kennedy Foundation and was great lawyer. My daughter is my oldest daughter is a circuit judge. The other two do charity type things, Make-A-Wish and things of that nature. But so anyhow, the book, Josh did a tremendous job in putting all this together. That here's all these great things that have happened in your life, and yet at the same time you did a lot of harm to the. One thing I'd want to mention, because a lot of my fraternity brothers.
Yeah, I was going to back up. Let me just do one more thing before we take questions. I want to back all the way up to the University of Florida, to the undergraduate years. This is Gator country, right? It was a very unique period of time because Fred was as he was later in life, this partier, having this great time, all through undergraduate school. He was such a lousy student that he had to go to summer school just to get a 2.0, just to get into law school. And this is back in the day when law school took everyone, and then they just flunked out, 5 out of every 6 students. So it was a time that I'd like you to talk a little bit about, because some of your fraternity brothers are here, and so they live with you during that. If they remember any of it, I don't know if you do.
Well, you have to picture. I'm from Pensacola, Florida, and there were very few Jewish guys my age, and so all of my friends were not Jewish, and we partied and we had a ball. I mean, everything was, the 50s. Those were great times, and no wars. The economy was good. I think Eisenhower was president. Everything was going well. So my buddies and I go off to the University of Florida. And 4 of us are staying in this apartment, and they have rush where you go to fraternities, and so I'm just dumb. I mean, really. All of the guys are going to go SAE, so I just assumed I was going to go SAE also. So they had to come in and tell me the night before that, Fred, you can't go with us. And I said, why? Well, you're Jewish. And I said, yeah. Well, it's against the bylaws and all that. However, let us tell you what. We have the coolest Jews in the world, the Teps, who are right down the street from us, the SAE house. So, and they want to really meet you, and you will be, they're great. So the next day, I go, and you're talking about events that'll change your life. This event, this day, totally changed a lot of things in my life. So I walk into the Tep house, and I put on the badge, and I go up and try to introduce myself to different people, expecting that these cool Jews, they're waiting on me. Nobody says a word. And I remember one of them said, well, just go get in line, Fred, and go get in line and get a hamburger. So I go in line, I get a hamburger, and I sit down by myself. Nobody says a word. So I sat around for about an hour, and I said, oh, hell, my total life was ruined. So I leave the Tep house, and I walk down, I guess it's University, and there's the SAE house, and everybody's celebrating there, and I'm just saying, oh, God, I don't know what to do now. So I go back to the apartment, and my one of the roommates had gone Sigma Chi, and he said, these guys at the house next to us would want to meet you. I've told them all about you. So I go over to the Pile Lamb house, and this is the animal house. If you know, I mean, I'd never seen anything like this in my life. However, at that point I had 2 choices. Well, I didn't have a choice. I mean, if I was going to go fraternity, this was it. So there I was. However, and through that fraternity, I met all these guys, and also Fred Vygotsky, who, well, actually, I first ended up rooming with Stanley Hammerschmidt. Now, Stanley was no rocket scientist, I can tell you. And I mean, really. And I know she's here now. But anyhow.
Well, on that note, we'll open it up for questions.
But no, having my whole life, I met my wife through Fred Vygotsky, and that's another story of, he says, oh, Fred, I want you to meet, she's the most gorgeous Jewish girl, and said, and you got to go meet her. So I go to, I guess, Broward Hall or something, and I walk in there, and there's a line of Teps and me. And they're all waiting, and so I didn't know what the hell. I've never been through anything like this. But anyhow, we ended up getting married. I would have never met her had it not been for these guys telling me to. Yeah. But it was quite a, and also Jack Graff. Jack goes and becomes a law partner of mine, and it's been quite a great life, really. And
Yeah, please.
I have two questions.
yes.
One to you is, how is your relationship with your children now? And to you, how did you end up writing this book? How did you come to write it?
All right. First, my relationship actually could not be any better. They, for whatever reason, I guess Martin, my son, probably is my best friend. I mean, we talk all the time. The daughters they want to take care of their daddy, and it's a great relationship. We were just with all of them
At
Saturday
the party
night.
Saturday
Yep,
night.
Saturday
Yeah,
night.
that's right.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And they all are. They're very proud of their father, and they're. Anyhow, it has gone very, very well. I mean, and they've all done very well, and so it's been a good life.
And the answer to the second question is, I'd been looking to write a book on a trial lawyer for a long time. When I grew up, my hero was F. Lee Bailey. I mean, he was John Havlicek of the Boston Celtics, Bob Greasy, who you all know, and F. Lee Bailey. Those were that was the triumvirate for me. I lived in Los Angeles during the O.J. Simpson case. Johnny Cochran, you know, the pocket squares and the Technicolor ties. I mean, these were guys who I just thought were outstanding, even though I was on the other side of the Johnny Cochran in that case. But I had been looking for this for a number of years, and Wayne Rogers, who was an actor and a businessman who I wrote a book with, told me that he had a place in Destin, and there was this wily old character in Pensacola who seemed to have all the elements of drama. So he set up a meeting with me, and it happened at the right time, I think, right after Fred's wife had died, when he was, willing to not only talk about all the great things that had happened, but also to reflect on, some of the more human elements of his story.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know, he's written quite. Tell some of the people you've written books about.
I write autobiographies and biographies. I work with Howie Mandel. I wrote his book, Bob Newhart, Jim Belushi, Jay Moore. I've written several science books, a book on resuscitation science last year called Erasing Death, a book on the finding and unearthing of a 47-million-year-old fossil. Sort of you name it, I've done it. But and I always look to do things in different areas, and this was an area I was looking into. And look, I couldn't have found a more colorful character than Fred Levin, and really a full life as well.
Yes.
Sure.
How did you meet Rubenesque?
He was my brother. It was Levin and Askew when I got out of.
That's how I know who you are.
Yeah.
Not
No,
just
I
because
got.
know you.
Yeah, I got out as soon as I got out of law school. I went to work at Levin and Askew. Now, that's another interesting story, and just how all things came about. I was the last thing in the world I wanted to be was a trial lawyer. I was going to go to tax law school. I had planned on going to NYU tax law school the following year. And so anyhow, my brother David graduated number 2 in his class, couldn't get a job in Pensacola with any of the more elite ivory tower firms that represent the power company and did the real estate and did the banks and all the foreclosure, everything. So you were pretty much relegated to doing personal injury cases, which were nothing back in, criminal cases and divorce cases, and they were doing a lot of divorce work. So the last thing I was ever going to do would be a trial lawyer and speak in front of a jury. And as things would happen, I had to do something. I was taking uncontested divorce cases and could get paid $50 for doing that. And all you had to do was just walk over to the courthouse and ask the lady the question, and you could just, the judge would sign, and you get your $50 and you were gone. Then for the you could get like $250 for a contested divorce case. And so this lady came in, and it was Levin and Askew, and both of them were tied up, and she needed a contested divorce. And I said, well, money-wise, you know, I could probably do it.
$250.
Yeah, $250. So she came into the office, and my brother David had told me that when you represent a woman in a divorce case, in a contested divorce case, you got to be macho, you got to be strong. And so she's said, what is your name, children, and where does your husband work? And she said, I need to tell you that my husband said he's going to beat the hell out of me. I said, lady, they all say that, don't worry. So I'm sitting there, and he said what he's going to do here and what he's going to do there. And then the thing that changed my whole life, she said, and he said, I'm going to kill your effing lawyer. and that was it. I said, lady, let me explain something to you. I'm just out of law school. I never did one of these things before in my life. And
Go see my brother. He'll take care of you.
just go back in the room, and then he'll sit there and take care of you. So from there, I didn't have anything else to do, so I ended up getting into trial work, and that's another whole story, long story, and you know, things, whatever they were, just happened to work out for me.
So while we're on the subject of divorce, I sat here and listened to you describe an extremely dysfunctional family and marriage. What was it that kept you from getting a divorce, or Marilyn from getting a divorce?
That's, well, and something that Josh came up with after she had passed away. I mean, it was contentious. I mean, all during this time, I'm sitting there listening to doctors telling me that there's no real pain there. She's just, anyhow, just that it was all in her mind and all this kind of stuff. Nowadays, you watch television and these ads come across all the time, you know, Crohn's disease, irritable bowel syndrome. They got drugs for them. And so it was always very, very contentious. And she never wanted any of this. I mean, by that, the last thing she wanted was, I thought, was for me to be this superstar. And I would buy her things that just, and Josh can tell you, I mean, beautiful, God, diamonds and everything. And she never wore them. And I always said that all she really wanted in life, and I think because of her parents, all she really wanted was the guy to come home. He could have worked in a gas station, come home and grab her and throw her in the sack and that kind of thing. So all during this time now, 51 years of marriage, I had just assumed that, you know, that she was leading this miserable existence, but we never. But anyhow, Josh will tell you that after she died, that something I never had any idea. She had, what, tons of scrapbooks.
Yeah, the most amazing thing is through all this, that Marilyn, his wife, had kept scrapbooks of all the clips of all the legal wins and the accolades and everything.
Everything.
And she had kept them all there. And in the end, it turned out that she was his biggest fan, and he didn't even know it.
Yeah. So, in answer to your question, that's how screwed up I was. In fact, the last, now this is sort of emotional. It was a Friday night before she died on Super Bowl Sunday, and I had no idea she was that sick. The ambulance had come, and so they were rolling her out, and she said, "Fred," and I said, "Yes." She said, "Just tell me you love me." Yeah. And I did, and that was the last thing I ever said to her.
On a lighter note.
I have a question from an audience member watching online. Dr. Monroe wants to know what you think of the Gulf Power case, and what do you think happened to Jake Horton?
All right.
Well, that was one of the two murders that Fred has been tagged with by members of many members of the community in Pensacola. No truth to it, but tell us what happened.
All right. Jake Horton, who was vice president at Gulf Power, W.D. Childers, who was the president of the Florida Senate, and myself became very, very close friends during this period of time. And Jake was loved two things. One was Gulf Power, and the other was Auburn University. And he was married, no children, and those two things were his life. And it was a Monday in April of 1988. He came to my office. At that time, I was the litigation lawyer for the power company, which is another whole story, and said that they were going to fire him. There were some things that were going on at Gulf Power. So when I said, no, that just can't be, and so I called Ed Addison, who was the head of Southern Company, which owned Gulf Power Company. And Ed said he didn't know anything about it, which I later realized that he did. And so Jake, who was in my office, said that he was going to go up to Atlanta to meet with them, and he called for the Gulf Power plane that was in Mississippi. Southern Company owned Mississippi Power, Alabama Power, Gulf Power, Georgia Power, and anyhow. So the plane was in Mississippi. He came and picked him up. It took off from Pensacola. The last things that Jake said as he walked out of the office, he said, if anything happens to me, Fred, make sure they take care of Francis. I said, Jake, are you crazy? And he said, I'll meet y'all back at 1 o'clock. And this was early. This was like 9. He was going to fly and be back. And at 1 o'clock he hadn't shown. 1:30 he hadn't shown. And I called the power company at 2 o'clock to find out what the plane. And they said, you hadn't heard? And I said, no. So the plane crashed shortly after takeoff. And the two pilots and Jake were killed. And that night, W.D. Childers and I went to the home of Jake to express our condolences. And W.D. goes into the bathroom, and he comes out, and he said, I need to tell you something. I said, what's that? He said, Jake's Auburn ring was in the bathroom along with his watch, and he would never take that off. So I knew then that Jake had committed suicide, but he took two pilots with him. And there are a lot of reasons why that.
But the trouble for Fred came because he was the counsel for Gulf Power. He wanted to come out and talk about this last conversation that he'd had with Jake Horton, because by this point everybody knows that the last person who saw Jake alive in Fred's office was Fred, but he wasn't able to do that because of his attorney-client privilege, which you kept trying to get them to waive so you could come and tell the story.
Mm-hmm.
So that led to a lot of suspicion that flowed back on you.
And that's another, I was up in it, oh gosh, they thought the mafia had killed him, and because he knew too much about the coal contracts and But no,
I mean,
And I mean, yeah.
it ended up like something out of The Godfather. You ended up finding dead canaries
Yeah.
on your doorstep and at your law firm, and the implication being, don't sing, don't talk, or we'll break your neck. And so all of this rolled into this huge drama that was covered by not only the local news, but by Time Magazine and the New York Times. Interestingly
book,
enough, Jay Carney, who was President Clinton's press secretary, was at Time Magazine. He wrote a series of stories that were helpful for my book in that. There was a book written about this, and it was one of these urban legends that just formed over the year, and people who didn't like Fred or didn't understand him assumed that he must have had something to do with this.
any other questions?
The second murder.
All right. The second murder was first one was a suicide.
The second,
They both were suicides, actually. The WD is what do they call it? You tenured out or whatever they
term limited from the
term
state
limited
Senate.
from the state senate. So he comes back to Pensacola and becomes a county commissioner. And you'd have to know him. He was the Banny Rooster, and he would take control of everything. Well, there was a situation about a soccer field, and the county bought it, and they claimed there was a bribery and they got one of the other county commissioners to flip, and it was Willie Jr. Willie Jr. was an African-American county commissioner. So Willie flipped and was going to testify against WD. And this is another one of those where the Bar Association got upset. I was not representing WD at this time, but I'm very good with the sound bite. And so they asked me, what are your thoughts about this, about Commissioner Jr. testifying against Commissioner Childers? And I made the statement, I said, if Willie had been on the Titanic, he'd have been in a dress with a wig on and in order to, that was the kind of guy he was. All right, bang. Willie cuts a deal and he gets a year and a half, but the next thing you know, Willie ain't there. They don't know where he is. He was supposed to go off for the year and a half. And about 30, 40 days later, somebody smells this odor coming from anyhow, Willie had gone under the guy's house, had drank antifreeze and beer, and died. So, again, I haven't made the statement about Willie. There were people who presumed that I had gotten rid of Willie. Now, how in the world I would have gotten up under a house, poured antifreeze down his throat. But it all goes back to when I first started practicing law. A lawyer named Shaky Latham in Pensacola said, whatever you do in the practice of law, he said, just get your name out there. Make sure they spell your name right, and just get your name, because nobody will ever remember what was said, but they will remember your name. And I pretty much live by that. Even the murder things. Oh gosh, they.
It was great publicity.
Great publicity. Yes.
You talked about how reluctant you were to be a trial lawyer, but look how successful you are. One of the things I want to ask you is, what do you think made you so successful? What were about the attributes that you possessed?
The same.
What did you have?
Okay.
What did you have that other people didn't have?
And I've got to go back when I was at the University of Florida with all these guys, and it was a joke. I mean, you drink, you party, you go to football games, you date, you do. Just had a great time. Well, all of a sudden, I wanted to stay. This has been 4 years. I knew I could get at least one more semester because it was going to take another semester for me to get a 2.0. But then I figured, all right, I'll go to law school. I'll get 3 more years of this. This is wonderful. So I go to summer school. I get my 2.0. I go to law school, and I'm sitting there with 360 white males. Well, actually, it was one woman, the only one woman in the whole 1,000 students in the whole University of Florida Law School. She went on to become a judge and retired. But anyhow, so I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden the back doors of the auditorium open up, and here comes the first black student to ever enter a white public institution in Florida, a guy named George Stark. Came in with U.S. Marshals, and this was 1958, which is what, 5, 6, 7 years before Mississippi and Alabama integrated. And anyhow, he walks in and they start shuffling, and I didn't know what the world's going on. I mean, it was a wooden floor, and they're shuffling their feet back and forth. And the poor guy, anyhow, they divide you into 2 sections, and I'm in one section with George, and in law school they would get study groups, and that was the way, 3 or 4 of you would get together and discuss the cases. Well, there were only 2 people in the whole 361 students that were there that didn't have, weren't in a study group. That was George, because he was black, and me, because they knew that I was stupid, because, they knew everything about you. This was, of the 360 students, 60 graduated. So that goes to show you. They knew they would cut. You didn't have, you go get a book to read a case, and they would have cut the case out of the book. It was dog eat dog. All right, so I realized that if I was going to get through this thing, I had to work. So for the first time in my life, I studied, and I worked. Never went to a football game, didn't do anything but work. And this ends up being a story about George Stark, too. And everywhere he'd go, they'd shuffle him. And he had enough sense not to ask questions, because, every other time he'd walk down the halls, they would use the N-word, and the professors wanted to get rid of him. And all right, he'd come in the library, and they'd shuffle, and he'd sit by himself. And I didn't have the guts to stand up for him. But anyhow, it's the end of the first semester, and crazy, I'm leading the class. All right, so there's a different situation. George walks into the library, and they start shuffling, and for some reason, I get up, I go sit down next to him. I said, George, you need any help? And he says, I sure do. I said, why don't you and I become a study group? So we became the study group. Unfortunately, I guess the end of the next semester, I was helping him with his getting ready for the exam, and we'd been up all night. First thing, when I told him I'd meet you at my apartment where my wife and I were living, and he's sitting on the steps when I get there, and I said, why don't you go in? Oh, he said, I knocked on the door, I didn't know you weren't here, and your wife invited me in, but a colored man doesn't go into a white woman's house. I said, well, anyhow, to make a long story short, we study all night long. He goes back to take a shower or get ready. I go to the exam, and he didn't show.
You didn't kill him, did you?
Well, not yet. So he didn't show, and so I had assumed that he had slept through the exam. All right, now jump forward to, it was I think it was October last year. It was the 50th anniversary of the first black to graduate at the University of Florida, and it was the 50th anniversary, and I was making the keynote address there, and George showed up, and he had a pretty rough life anyhow. So we're seated at the same table, and I said, it really does upset me that you slept through that exam. He said, I didn't sleep through the exam. I said, what happened? He said, I showed up about 5 minutes late, and the professor said, you can't come in. And that's what flunked him out. So anyhow, getting back to the answer to your question, I realized that I could, through hard work, could be known for something other than a goofball and a joke, and so from there, of those 360 students. I actually did graduate first among all of them. A couple of guys came in from another class that were ahead of me. But, and then started practicing law the same way, and to this day, I work 7 days a week, and so the bottom line is, and I'll lecture on this, preparation, I'll out-prepare the guy, and I don't care what it is. I'd rather, if you're going to hire a lawyer, I want one well-prepared rather than one who's great, who's going to pick up the file and walk in and do that.
Folks, we have time for one more question right back here.
Yeah, just a quick question. What was it like growing up in Pensacola in the Jewish community there when you were?
Good question.
All right, yes. I grew up, huh?
How big was your Seder?
It was big. It was big. I grew up in a kosher home. There were 6 boys. And it's funny, in the little town of Pensacola, there were 2 kosher butcher shops. And, but anyhow, and I was telling Fred Bogosky, I laid tefillin until I was 16 years old. And he said, "Who was she?" Yeah, he was from Newberry, South Carolina. But no, and so it was. I grew up in a very Jewish home, and until when I got to high school, I assimilated to. There weren't that many Jewish guys my age, and so that's. But I never realized anti-Semitism until I got to the University of Florida. Now I look back and I realize then that it was there. I mean, it was there. I couldn't go to the country club. There were just so many things that were back in those days that but I didn't care. I mean, you just didn't realize. I mean, that there was something that wasn't right.
Ever think about starting to lay tefillin again?
I will tell you this, that I did, what was it, last Thursday?
Yeah,
Last Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Last Wednesday.
Wednesday night.
Yeah, and she was one. No.
Put on tefillin last Wednesday?
No. Last Wednesday I was in New York, and you know what the Chabad is? Are y'all familiar with the Chabad? All right, that's another long story, but the number one rabbi in
Yeah, the Rebbe. Yeah, the Rebbe is
the one who was the assistant to the Rebbe for all these years, and so I was there, and anyhow went and visited the Rebbe's grave and all of this, and so before I went to the grave site, another one of the rabbis said, let me put the tefillin on you, and he did. So that was just a week ago, and no, it was that was an experience too. That's another. Oh God.
That's the second book.
yes.
By the way,
Many more great stories in the book.
No, the Chabad
As well.
The Chabad at the University of Florida in Gainesville, which surpasses Hillel like 2 to 1. It's almost unbelievable, and the name on it is the Marilyn Levin Center for Chabad or whatever it is. So that's the reason that the Rebbe's assistant wanted it.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you all for being here. Our 2 distinguished guests, thank you very much. The books are for sale behind the counter. If you're watching online, give us a call, and the gentleman will be signing the books right here.